But thank you for letting me join you in Nova Scotia, all the way from sunny Southern California, out in the middle of the high desert. Um, yeah, it was great to meet Tara and be introduced to Sarah as well, and to find a lot of common ground. And it's been quite a journey to develop this work, kind of from the ground up over the past number of years. I guess it's been in the works for about 5 years now, personally. And then to be connected with like minds that are not in my country, which is fantastic to have international collaboration going. And yeah, they wanted me to kind of open with the song, so I think that's a good way to start it. And then I think Tara and Sari wanted to kind of prompt with some questions about the process and the music as well as the visual art. Great. Well, I will start with a special one that I wrote for a gentleman about a year ago. And I think it's very applicable, just coming from this year of COVID and a lot of challenge. And it's kind of brought out the best and the worst in most of us, I think. And I met him at the beginning of, well, it was, I'd say it was the 24th of June in 2020. And so it was right after things started moving around and, life started changing a bit. And when I came to him, he was a young man in his early 40s, what I would consider young, working with traditional hospice patients. Um, and he was dying from a pretty brutal form of cancer that was bringing him a lot of pain and a lot of change in his function and his life as he knew it. And so when I came to him, I was just amazed at his acceptance, and there was this good humor, but without a trace of denial. And here I come from this month or two of dealing with, oh my gosh, my life has changed, to this guy who's like, his life is not only changing but ending. And still he was positive and looking for opportunity within the difficulty. And so I asked him, I'm like, well, how did you come to this place? How did you find this kind of fortitude, this freedom? And he's like, I see this as an opportunity to give love and to be an example despite the challenge. He's like, my children are here. He had a couple teenage kids and his family and friends, and he was an icon of his community out in the desert, a pillar that people would look to. And he's like, these people are watching me and I can be an example. And he says, I could choose to focus on my pain and woe is me. He's like, that's in there. He acknowledged the fact that existed in him and it was a choice as well. And he's like, I choose to be encouraging, and I choose to leave behind a legacy that my family can consider when they're facing their own challenges later in life. And that selflessness just blew me away. I mean, I've seen, I'd say, hundreds of people die in my life, and that kind of perspective that was so crisp in him was very rare, but I found it in a number of other people as well. And it just seems to be the key to life, to consider others and your offering to them, and how your life and example becomes a part of all who know you. And it can be a positive influence or it can be a negative influence. And so for him, I showed him a legacy song I wrote for my aunt, actually, before she died. It was called Star. And it was about that symbolism of how you are art and you are an example, and you don't have to be an artist to be an artist, essentially, is the term. And he was so moved, and he's like, my God, like, I feel like that's me. And I, he's like, I want to be a song too, if you could do it. And so I later was able to write this song, Shadow of the Pine, that I was able to play at his memorial. And I think it stands as a pretty wonderful symbol, to me personally, to remember that in every challenge and every shadow, you know, I have the choice to be love or I can be fear, and I can lift people up and consider others selflessly as best I can, or I can turn inward and essentially just, you know, dissolve all of that. And whenever I start questioning it, I just think of the song. And I think of Jared and his example. So hopefully with the Zoom sound, this will be okay. It's called Shadow of the Pine. Would you look at that pine standing tall in the middle of the town? When he makes that shade, we all come round. 'Cause it sure gets hot out here between the summer and the sun. Getting so weepy, sweating like bullets from a gun. But it ain't so bad, no, we'll be doing just fine. 'Cause we got it made when we got the shade of the shadow of the pine. Now the summer's over and the lightning storm comes round. It struck our boy and he come tumbling down. Well, the bigger they are then, I guess the harder they fall. Sitting on top of his trunk, we feel so small. Well, it's all that's left, and you can bet we'll cry, thinking about the days when we had the shade of the shadow of the pine. Now the snow's been dancing like that lady's cotton gown. Lord, you know it's cold and there ain't much sound. Help me get this fire burning so the light is warm and white. Silhouette of the wood that burns inside. Where we all come around with love and a little bit of wine. We don't got the shade, but we got it made in the shadow of the pine. We don't got the shade, but we got it made in the shadow of the pine. We don't got the shade, but we got it made in the shadow of the pine. Thank you, guys. The silent Zoom clap. What a familiar applause these days. Well, thank you. That's an honor to share that song, and I hope you find it encouraging. Would Tara or Sarah like to introduce a question or anything I can talk about?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Ian, for people who are just kind of leaping into this, for whom the concept of a legacy song might be relatively new, if we want to just talk about, I think it's not uncommon for people to write songs that kind of maybe pay tribute to someone else, but there's something particular about the process of the legacy song and how you approach it, how it's created. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you built this process that now you're sharing, kind of teaching other people to adopt as well, because it is fairly specific in the way you do it. You've got it down to a beautiful science, so maybe you can tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a simple science, thankfully. But yeah, I worked in medical nursing for years before I got into hospice, and there was just this struggle with the curative mindset to where it was not that the cure was bad, but it was distracting psychologically from accepting a circumstance to be informed by it. And so there was a lot of resistance and a lot of denial. And I just was walking through that for years, through like ICU and cardiology and neurology, and just like seeing a lot of disease, but a lot of like I felt deep down that there was something missing. There was like opportunities to learn from change and through pain and essentially like fragility that just wasn't present in those environments. And so eventually I traveled as a nurse and ended up doing a single hospice patient on a cardiology round. And when I stepped into that room, I heard the dialogue between the family and the patient and the hospice nurse that was in there. And there was this incredible surrender to the circumstances and this honesty and this openness. And there just felt like there was no veil, and there was such a strength to that. Oh, as the comment just said, vulnerability and strength. And I was amazed. I was like, this is it. Like, this is the truth. This is human experience at its finest. And my musician artist mind was live in that moment. And I followed the hospice nurses back into their office. And I was like, guys, do you learn from these people that you work with? And they said, yes, they're our greatest teachers. And I just thought back to all the patients that I'd learned from that essentially didn't know that they were teaching. They were suffering, but they didn't see any meaning. There was no tangible meaning that came from that interaction. There was just me there for a moment, then I was gone. Part of it was the nursing shifts back then. You only see them for a portion, but the hospice relationship is ongoing, and you walk with this person all the way to the end. And then you walk with the family after the end many times. And so I asked the nurses in that room, I'm like, is there anybody in an artistic sense that you know of that's formalizing this relationship to where you can sit with somebody who has little time left and you can learn from them and physically construct something in the form of a song, which to me was alive. The song is alive, and it can be shared to countless people all around the globe, and it's not limited by space or time, really. It's just the click of a button anywhere in the world. And I'm like, there's so much potential here, like, oh my goodness. And they're like, we've never heard of this before. Like, maybe once or twice, like, people have done it to a degree, but there's no like consistent activity with it that they've known as any kind of relationship or an entity or an artist that does this. Oops. Sorry, folks. I had a call come in. I thought I was on Do Not Disturb, but apparently not. Um, and so I devoted the majority of my time to pursuing this idea and really like how to introduce it to medical groups and hospices and people even in a way that was palatable, or at least, they could understand the potential. Because, I remember people just being like, never heard of that before. Huh. Okay. And then over the years to just be able to do it again and again and again and again, and essentially have these people be leaders for others that would be suffering as they have later on. There's so many elements to this that engage a sense of meaning and hope through leadership, through that experience, and like finding context and purpose through the ability to give even in that circumstance. Because I think with the relationship of simply me as a songwriter being able to sit with the person who has so much to share and to be able to witness and honor them in a very focused way, and involving family as well to engage in that. Um, that's a missing ingredient so many times in our modern age. People, especially now, after this year of isolation, most people just are alone and they feel obsolete or oblivious, or they feel not oblivious, but they feel like they're facing oblivion, like they're not of value anymore in their own eyes. And so to be able to honor wisdom and the truth of real experience in retrospect, with the context of brevity being present, like you have the final months of life and the people that have the ability to look back on their lifetime and to identify themes of victories, defeats, joys, and regrets, and the things that make life worth living, and to be able to have that lens. I found many people end up being able to see it but not share it. And so this is essentially a way for people to be able to share it very clearly and to be honored for that incredible potential of service through that kind of wisdom to the rest of us. And so I've I started working primarily with hospice patients, but then through the past couple years, it's been branching off into grief support for remembrance and memorial, and how people come to me with, someone that has recently passed away, and they get to reflect upon that person posthumously. And then the song is created from that memory, and it becomes a symbol of that love and of that story. And that has a lot of wonderful value to it as well. It's just a different vehicle than the hospice engagement. And so with that, I've applied that to the visual arts as well, and to where for years during my nursing and music studies, I also studied at art schools and with my different masters and mentors, and kind of a classical Renaissance realism style. And I was always fascinated with the human body. I think partially working in medicine, I learned all the mechanics of it and all the sciences of the machine. And then art drew me more towards the poetry of that machine, and how through time and studying the old masters, it's, the human body is this timeless divine vehicle that is just here for a moment. And there was something meditative about that for me, that was just very, very deep in me as well, that was kind of called forth every time that I worked in front of death or alongside death. And then I had my mother, of all people, just recommend one day, just said to say, like, you found this depth with music by engaging with human life and human stories. And with art, what if you used that same analogy but incorporated actual human remains to create portraitures of memorial for people, and even figurative art that would describe something of so much deeper context than just a beautiful image. To have that kind of mortal symbolism there has just completely changed art for me, 100%, just as the music has changed with the people within the songs. And so since then, I've had people come to me with the ashes of their loved ones, and to request a portrait to be done with them, and literally with them. And that kind of connection has a lot of layers of just this profound symbolism there too. It's because when, like, I had a woman give me her son, or part of her son's ashes, and she wanted the work to be done for a portrait as well as the figurative work that would proceed after the portrait. And she said she felt like she was leaving part of her son with me, and that kind of ceremony was very difficult initially for her, understandably. We're used to having the ashes tucked away in one place to just be there, and that's it. But she felt like there was this freedom that was being found within the surrendering of her son, and of that part of what she was holding on to. And a lot of that pain of that loss was released as well through that engagement, because she knew that that symbolism of her son was then going on to become alive again, and in the form of all of us, and and all that art would speak to in the lives of the rest of us. And so between that and the music and the art, like that's been my life, and it's been amazing to see what can come from this. Just what light lies within the darkest shadows, essentially, and how that exploration through just the energy of music and the creation of something new alone can just bring so much hope.
And I have a question for you.
Sure.
Um, so can you talk about, because I know when Tara and I had our interview today, I spoke about the process, like the actual process, and what you shared with me is what I use when I'm writing legacy songs. So could you
Mhm.
talk about the process of how you actually construct a legacy song, from start to finish, and also with the artwork, like what that process is like as well?
Sure, sure. With the music, I'll give you an example from like where I sit with a person on hospice. And so the meeting begins with typically an introduction to what a legacy song is, and how what they're sharing today will be remembered. And then I have this flexible interview that I do that I've adapted from a book called The Five Secrets You Must Learn Before You Die by Dr. John Izzo. And it's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. And he interviews a huge number of wise elders within the book to identify certain themes of human living. And he presents in the interview that he used in the back of the book. And he's like, I encourage you all to interview your own wise elders. So go out and do it. And so I take that interview as kind of a roadmap for what I do, because it's beautiful. It covers a lot of different themes on spirituality and life reflection and crossroad moments. And you really get to the core of what that person really cares about and what that person's learned, which I found is very important to get to, because a lot of people maybe initially feel like when they tell their story, they just want to tell dates and times, where they lived, what they did, how many years they served in the military, this and that. And those are all great details as far as their story, but the idea is to get down to what they've learned, and then what they would like to share, and what matters most, and what they wish other people would learn. And so I typically interview over 1, 2, or 3 sessions, depending on what the client wishes. And I record it and I keep it for my writing process. And then for some people, I publish it along with the song, so the listener of the song later gets to hear the actual voice of that person, and then the song that was inspired from them. But then I go home to my studio and I listen to those interviews all over again, top to bottom. And I'm very prayerful about it, actually. I ask my God to show me what this person wants the most and what matters most and how this song could serve them best. And then there's always this gem in there, this glimmer of a theme, which I kind of call the North Star of a song. And that seems to be, at least in a personal sense, what influenced me most from that person. So there's this very natural influence from them to me. And then I attach other elements of the song through my songwriting process to construct the full song. And then I record it and make it into a little MP3 on a thumb drive for him. And then I have a lyric plaque that I contract with a local engraver, and the lyrics are printed on a sheet of gold with the cherry wood backing. And it says, a song inspired by the legacy of this person. And then I attach the thumb drive to the bottom so the patient has a tangible representation of that song that they keep in the house with the family. And it just helps remind them, later on as they face more challenge with their pain or their, any number of challenge that comes from facing death. That song and the plaque can kind of be this beacon of meaning that can be like, all right, I did that. That is alive. That will continue on. There was a woman that I worked with that was a really powerful moment for her. When she heard the song, she held the plaque in her hands, and she sat there after the song was done for like 5 minutes in silence, just staring at the plaque. And eventually she took off the earphones and she's like, I get it. She's like, this is me. This will live, though I may die. And that gave her so much hope, and it walked with her to the end, and walks with all of us, her family, myself, long after. And so then with the ashes work, the family brings me a portion of the remains. It doesn't have to be more than a couple ounces. And I prepare it with a blend of charcoal, and I kind of ceremoniously blend it, as a meditation of, to the dust we must return. Just personally as an artist, it's how I really try to engage with it as reverently as possible, and use it as a mirror, essentially, of myself. I'm I'm holding someone in my hands and creating this shadow on paper. And through the process of drawing, I draw backwards to begin, and I use an eraser to pull the light from the dark. And so like that begins the construction of the form, and I kind of pull the face from the darkness through the charcoal and the ash. And that artistic process for me is just, it's been really transformative for me over the past years. Um, and I try to get as much information on that loved one as possible. Like the family tells me all sorts of stories, and just elements of their character and their nature and their, the legacy that's still alive within them after they've gone. And that definitely informs how I approach the drawing, and how it can even influence the shape or the expression or the lighting or any number of things that just kind of come out in the craft. And then when it's finished, I prepare the family, and they come over, and here in California, we cook them dinner and present the portrait, and it's always this very, very special moment. How it's like they're seeing them again, and it always seems to be in the eyes. It always seems to be like, there he is again, and it becomes a symbol for them. It goes beyond the the stillness of what the vase would represent. How the vase is typically in an honored place in the house on the mantle, as a symbol of what remains within them. But the portrait is essentially that, but more alive. And it brings an element of personality to them again, and a reminder to live, and a revisiting of love every time you look at it. And they can go back to that feeling. And I love the literature that's been done on love and loss. And Viktor Frankl was a wonderful writer that wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and he just had an incredible story about that. And a portion in that story was, he was away from his beloved, and at the time it was very likely that she had been killed. But in the depths of his pain and his suffering, that feeling of love and that connection to how much he still loved her, even though she wasn't anywhere near him, made her feel more alive than when they were really together in person. Given that context of the distance and the pain, the love was all the greater. And so there's elements of that we found in the portraiture, and it's just very special and very simple. It's not a complicated process, but that's the beauty of the arts. It's very human. It's very oriented to just people helping people. And so that's typically it. That's the process for both.
I have a question that came up both
Mhm.
on the radio today, and then my friend Alex Cook wrote a piece preparing for this workshop, and asked sort of the same thing about, for anyone who has written songs or makes artwork of some kind, and it's for or about someone, sometimes there's a bit of a trepidation about whether you will really reflect them, or whether you've really captured the essence of the relationship or that person. And I'm wondering, from either of you, Ian or Sarah, if there was ever any trepidation on your part, especially early on in the first few songs or the first few pieces of visual art. Just wondering if you really caught it, like, if that was something you had to work through at some point and make your peace with.
Yeah, I could share. Do you have any immediate thoughts, Sarah?
My immediate thoughts to that question are, yes, at least for me, I'm much more new at this than Ian is. There is some trepidation. However, the content is so full of the person who it's for. I kind of liken it, and I don't know if you find this, Ian, but I kind of liken it to like a musical jigsaw puzzle. So I'm not really searching for any content to work with. It's more of, how can I piece it together in the way that's going to do the most justice to the person that it's for and represent them the most. So that's the part that I think I do worry about a little bit, but then by the end, I kind of, you pick a few key themes and you're like, this is very central to who that person was. And if I can include a little anecdote that's maybe very specific to like a saying that that person said or something like that, then that's been my experience so far anyways. Like a musical jigsaw.
That's great. I see it very similarly. It's like a puzzle. And as a songwriter, there's only so many different things you can bring to a song before it starts to get a little diffuse or maybe less effective, or it draws away from a core theme. And when you're dealing with these people, and it's just like you're engaged with them in such a way to where they're just covering you with all of this information and these stories, and there's so much about this person that you get to be a part of. And the difficulty, and I think therein lies the artistic challenge, to interpret parts of that person and choosing the elements that, like you said, do them justice. And what I've liked to explore most is what to say that makes that person feel most heard, or that person most reflected and most meaningful at that point. Like, there's only so much you can say in 3.5 minutes, and I think part of the joy and the humility of it too is just doing your best, and how with this process, the song becomes something there that wasn't there before, and anything is beautiful if it holds them truly. And I think it's tough for an artist not to be like, oh my gosh, is it good enough? Like, I could have done better. Like, I could have done this and that. But really, just the humble offering of creating something for that person should be the heart of it. I think that's the humility of the engagement, to just be like, I'm just doing my best to present something that, you know, represents my gratitude for you teaching me. That's a big part of it for me. And it's honest at that point. It's like, you truly taught me, and this is what it is, and this is what I hope represents you, and that will continue to connect with people as the song continues to be shared and performed, and as the story's told. And I find that that's a pretty good standard to go by, is just the honest learning that comes from it.
It's beautiful.
Do you
Tara,
find...
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, Tara.
I have so many questions, as always. Do you find a commonality in the people that approach either of you to craft a legacy song, whether it is someone who is nearing the end of life knowingly, or whether it is a family in retrospective or loved ones in retrospective? Do you find a commonality or sense it in their reasonings for wanting to go through this process and create this song, or do you find it's more a case by case, depending on the circumstances of the person's passing or the relationship? I'm just curious if there are common threads that draw people to this process, or if it really is singular.
I'll start again, Ian, if you want, because I think you can probably you have more examples to kind of go off of. But in the songs that I've written so far, I would say that across all of the people that have been a part of the process, there's a certain amount of openness that they have, like a willingness to engage. At least that's been my experience so far. Um, most of the songs I have written have been for people who have already lost their loved one and they're looking for a meaningful way to commemorate them. So there's also that element of wanting to tell stories and wanting to keep alive the memory of their loved one, that they're really excited about, because it's a unique process, and it's, you know, it's a very personal thing to be able to write a personalized song for someone. So I think that I would say number one is the willingness to be open, because if the questions are kind of hard, and even if just asking to hear about someone who's lost a loved one, they have to be willing to share the stories, and willing to maybe cry with a stranger, which has happened, and it's quite beautiful to just be able to sit there and listen to people as they talk about their loved ones. But I think it's courageous on their part too, to take part in something where they don't know what they're going to get and maybe they just met you. um yeah, that's
Would
what I
you
would
want
say.
to share some of the questions? I know that you and Ian have collaborated a bit and talked about the process, and maybe he's given a bit of coaching, but I'm curious about if you can give some examples of what the kind of questions are that you would ask, someone that you're working with, whether, in either circumstance, whether it's the individual themselves or family and friends after the fact. So, yeah, well, what kind of specifics would you be asking? I'm curious.
Do you have
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
favorite, Sarah?
I'm just like pulling up my question checklist actually right now. um well, for people who have lost loved ones, the type of questions, it's like, how would you describe them? And these are questions again that Ian has helped me with here. What were they passionate about? Do they have any memories that they like to talk about as them being a child or a young kid? One of the questions that I always hesitate to ask is, and it's the answer is always quite beautiful, but again, because it's so personal, I don't want to like upset the person. But I also, every time I've asked this question, it's been really valuable to writing the song. Is, if they were here now, what would they tell you? And if they were here now, what would you tell them? And that has always given a deeply personal answer.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian, I'll let you speak about maybe the other, like for people who are at the end of life, the
Right.
questions, or if you have anything to add. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and to kind of reflect what you said previously, like the openness is such a beautiful thing. It's truly the key. I mean, if people have that sense of curiosity to what they still have left to give, and the curiosity of valuing themselves in a different way, even too, to find that strength within, and bringing all of those fears out, and being open and honest in a way that, man, given the context, it's just unbelievable. But it's very key, people, who would be still abiding in, that sense of confusion or fear, or just, unwillingness, they're not typically able to engage in this kind of way. And but there's still hope in there too. I've been able to sit with people who are, you know they have that shell and they've got that storm going on, and the music still has a place to penetrate that in gentle ways. And I think, there's potential within every heart to be transformed into love, and to have this kind of perspective come forth. But a few of the questions that I really love in particular from the series that I use from the book is, there's a where you're speaking to a younger you, actually. It's let me see how it's worded. Yeah, what would you wish you would have done, or what do you wish you would have learned sooner? If you could go back to when you were a young adult and have a conversation with yourself, and you knew that you would listen, what would you tell that younger person about life? And usually that person just kind of sits back, strokes their chin for a second, and then they lay it on thick. And it's just like, giving that person the opportunity to become the teacher, and the witness to become the student. It's very special, and it allows them to kind of go into those deeper waters, the regrets, and the challenges of all that mortality brings, and the difficulties of facing previous demons or so, coming back to haunt you in the end when things are all coming down. When they know that they're being honored as a teacher, they can present everything as a lesson, and everything that they experience becomes meaningful at that point to many of us. So there's another one about crossroads that I really like too, and it's that big decision that you make. Tell me about the few major crossroad moments in your life, times when you went in one direction or another, and it made for a large difference in terms of how your life turned out. And that's a nice reflection to go with people too, because they can trace back to that one thing that made a huge difference, and sometimes it was a very small thing. And for the rest of us, it just helps reflecting on being aware of those small moments that we might overlook, that might be monumental for life. But yeah, I see some questions coming in. Do we want to save them for the end, or do we want to go for them now? What do you think?
Maybe we can address this one for either of you if you've written legacy songs with children.
Hmm.
I guess that's meaning minors,
Minors, young
young
children.
children, I think.
No, I haven't personally, but I think there's a lot of need. I think that kind of levity for children is really powerful. I've written songs with children. I was a music teacher actually at the same time I was doing hospice work in San Diego. I was teaching at a local music school and teaching kids songwriting. And that thought occurred to me, because, with my colleagues in medicine, they work at Children's Hospital, and of course, music therapy is a big presence with pediatrics, but I think it would have a lot of value. I think it would look a little differently as far as the maturity of the storytelling, and the meaning behind the legacy song would look different for children. But I think it could be beautiful, especially for the parents to be involved, and for the cheer and the life of music to kind of bring a balm to something that, is so painful. So, good question.
I know early on at the funeral home, when children would come in, there was often that question of whether kids should be there or not. And, especially during visitations when it's long and it's just grown ups standing around talking. And just seeing the purity of expression from kids if you give them paper and crayons, so simple. But the pictures and cards and messages they would write were so open and expressive. When you had all these grown-ups standing around trying to kind of awkwardly skirt the issue of death, and the kids just embraced it and were so free in their feelings, paying tribute. I think that could be an amazing experience, having children be part of that process, whether it's commemorating someone who's passed away or working with them to craft their own legacy song would be heart heavy work, I'm sure.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be.
I think if it's okay with you guys, I would love to hear some more legacy songs. And maybe Sarah, are you prepared to play us one of your songs?
I am prepared. I just need to get my guitar.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah, I think Ian calls this a Nashville round. So I think we're all gonna play a tune. It's again following the Music and Communities mandate. Must play music. Yeah, so I'm gonna share a song here. I'll just give a little bit of a story. This song is called Nanyu Stenla, which is an indigenous word. The person I wrote it for, it was really quite incredible to speak with her because she had just lost her son in February of this year. And she had been referred to me by a friend. And I just don't think I could have it in me to to talk to a stranger about these types of things. But she had so many beautiful stories to tell. And I called this song Nanyu Stenla because in her language, it means I will see you again. And that was something that her son always said to her when she would say goodbye. And then her son would say, no, it's not goodbye. It's Nanyu Stenla, or I'll see you again. So that was sort of like Ian talked about those kind of gems and those anchors to hold on to. That was that for this song. And she had so much to tell me. She showed me photos of him as a little boy. He was a hockey fan, so he was always wearing jerseys, which I reference in the song too, of wearing black and white and red. And it was also interesting too, writing a song for this person that had died who was also my age. It was, yeah, interesting to talk to her for sure. And yeah, I'm just gonna share the song now. I'm not gonna tell you the whole story and then sing it to you. So this is called Nanyu Stenla. Squeeze my hand, squeeze it hard. Though you had to go, we're never apart. Would have turned 31, my kind, loving, generous son. Anyone that met him would say that he laughed a lot, never did things halfway. So many friends, he was never alone. There were days after dark, she'd have to tell them to go home. It's never goodbye, it's see you later. He'd remind me in his way. Nanyu Stenla, Nanyu Stenla, I will see you again. He could work a crowd like no other, reenacting movie scenes with his brother, and everybody was amazed when from memory he knew the words to walk the line at karaoke. You might find him in the shop with his uncle and father. Baba taught him how to fish. Here's the rod, go to the water. When he met the land again, she said, welcome, my friend. I held you in the start. I held you in the end. It's never goodbye, it's see you later. He'd remind me in his way. Nanyu Stenla, Nanyu Stenla, his way. Nanu Stanla, Nanu Stanla, I will see you again. I will see you again. The silent gloom, Zoom clap.
I'll do a loud clap. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Alrighty. Ian or Tara, who's next? Maybe we can do Tara and then Ian.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Whatever
then
you'd like. There was a line just really quick in that song, "Here's the rod, go to the water." So good.
He loves to fish.
Well, man, that's just the analogy of that too. Oof.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I feel like an imposter in this situation because I haven't been in the practice of walking through legacy songs the same way that you folks have. It's kind of the songs that I've written that have been a specific tribute to a person have come about through the funeral planning process, where you're naturally working with a family and, you know, writing an obituary and choosing photos with them and crafting a service that is reflective of that person. But there have been circumstances too where the family has requested a song but not been able to choose which one, or not, you know, not wanting a hymn, not wanting a specific song. So those are the instances where I have written, you know, a tribute song or something akin to a legacy song, but I don't feel right playing those. They're not songs that I perform or distribute because they've just been private projects with that family and performed privately with that family at a service. So I'm going to cheat a bit here tonight, if you'll indulge it, and play a song that sort of sits somewhere in the middle between, you know, reflecting on my family and the people who have passed on, and then thinking about what I would want to send forward with the family I still have with me now. So it's a song about family trees that's called Manitoba Maple. There is one tall tree, a Manitoba maple, a rocking like a cradle when the wind and rain combine. And I watch through the window as the hurricane advances. The maple bends and dances, the power leaves the line. My family tree is narrow, no sisters and no brothers, my father and my mother, my children and my love. And I hope that I can give them the time and space and sunlight to be happy in their own right and reach for stars above. And when the Manitoba maple's coming down and the branches die, we'll finally tie a yellow ribbon round. But the roots run deep, and there we keep the seeds of memory nested in the branches of our family tree. Musicians, cooks, and bakers, painters and school teachers, Pentecostal preachers, On the promises they stand. And my grandma was a wonder. When her time had come to part, I sang her in the garden till she let go of my hand. And when the Manitoba maple's coming down and the branches die, we'll finally tie a yellow ribbon round. But the roots run deep in there, we keep the seeds of memory nested in the branches of our family tree. As the storm passes over, the soft light of a candle finds the pictures on my mantle, the smiles on wedding days, and may we stay warm and steady like a Manitoba maple, rocking like a cradle with the strength to bend and sway. And when the Manitoba maple's coming down and the branches die, we'll finally tie a yellow ribbon round. But the roots run deep in there, we keep the seeds of memory nested in the branches of our family tree. Nested in the branches of our family tree.
Wonderful.
That song gets me every time.
Uh,
Oh, wow. Thank you, Terra.
Oh,
and Tara, may I just humbly say, what you do is not an imposter to this legacy process at all. It's a different dance, you know, the way that you can sit with people and learn and engage with them and reflect with them and then even surprise them with the song. You know, that's the same. It's the same. It's just a different engagement.
yeah. Well,
Thank you
what
for
I've
what you do.
loved about this, the last workshop we did last week, Sarah, and this one is that mindfulness about kind of making the line not so dark or so severe between, end of life and then after end of life, and thinking about it more as a contiguous thing, a line running through rather than just, death, funeral afterward, but
Mhm.
uniting the whole process and opening up these conversations now in advance while we're still here. So, yeah, thank you both for the work you're doing on that front. So, I did want to throw one question into the mix before we keep our round going because my
Sure.
friend Jerry in Australia had a good question. Do the people who know they are dying ever leave a legacy song for their families to hear for the first time once they have passed as kind of a personal legacy to their own close ones, their own loved ones? So crafting a song and knowing that people won't
Holding
hear
on
it
to it.
until afterward. Has that ever been the case?
Oh, that's an interesting idea. No, I haven't done that before, but it's like a time capsule idea. Oh, I love that. It's interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value there. I traditionally have just done, we have the family come and present the song, and it's like collective celebration. But Um, but yeah, I know that kind of organically family end up hearing the song at the memorial or after the memorial that hadn't heard it before, and that has a different effect, because it's like they're gone and this song is still here. But having it formalized between the person presenting the legacy song to where that's the specific intention, I haven't done before, but it might be interesting to introduce to people.
I wonder if people at
It'd be
home
great.
are thinking about what their legacy song would be that they would leave behind, what would be in it.
Good thing to consider.
Yeah.
I have.
Ian, oh, go ahead. Yeah, question for Ian. Do you do legacy songs for people virtually due to COVID/distance?
I do. I do. About half of my legacy work is through Zoom. So that's a wonderful thing that has been able to maintain through the change. Is it's not quite the same as sitting in the same room and like holding the hand of the person and just like being right there, but it's still it's still something, and it still contains the general meaning, and it's still beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do. I love to do it that way too. It's flexible.
Yeah, all of the songs that I've done have been via Zoom except for one, because people live in different provinces, it is cool to be able to do that on Zoom. Um, Ian, do you want to play a song and then we can kind of open it up if people have more questions?
Mhm.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and kind of going from a thought that Tara inspired when she was talking about the introduction of how, sometimes these circumstances happen and there isn't the formality to this is something you're giving me so that I can create something and give it back. Sometimes that happens organically as a surprise, and it's even a surprise to myself sometimes. And it becomes more of an homage to where they didn't even know they were giving something that had any kind of inspiring or lasting value to it. But I'll share one for my round song called Give Her Flowers Now. And I was working with the hospice as a nurse at the time, and I was out with my mother and my partner, and we were all kind of getting settled into a evening of jazz music and just kind of enjoying what was to be a relaxing, cheerful night. And then I received a call from my company, and they were like, "Hey, this family, their mother just passed. We need you there now." And so I'm like, "Okay, goodbye, ladies. I will see you way later tonight, I'm sure." And then I went to this household, and all the family was there, and they were very welcoming to me to come in, and they were all just like, "Please sit down." And there she was, the wife, and this mother was lying in her bed, dead, and the children were present, the husband was present, and they just asked me to sit down. They're like, "Can you just sit and have a piece of pie? Like we made some pie, and it's hot, and we just would love to talk to you and tell you about who this woman was." And I was just like, "Yes, of course, please." And we had to wait for the mortuary for like 3 hours, and so we had a lot of time to just be there. And there was something so special to just be there with her body and with her living family, and just celebrate the joy and the pain, and how the family acknowledged that she was very loved, and this would be a painful road after the goodbye. But because she was pretty young as well, I think she was 61. But the husband told me, he's like, when we were young, we had such love, and there was always the opportunity to give more, and we gave a lot to each other. We just gave as much as we could, and he's like, but man, now that she's gone and I'm sitting here on her bed, and just thinking that now all the flowers I can give her will just be for her grave, and how I wish that every flower that I'm going to give her now, I could have given her when she was alive. And just that ringing, haunting irony of you don't know what you've got until it's gone type of thing. And I was so struck with that because I am so blessed to love someone so deeply, and to think that I am giving as much as I can, but just seeing him and her in this context just really shook me and reminded me that time is so precious, and we're so fragile, and how there's so much more that we can give if we open ourselves to that love and that realization of preciousness. And so as I was leaving that night, it was probably 2:30 in the morning, and he catches me on the way out, and he's like, "Ian, are you going home to your gal?" I'm like, "Yes, sir, I am." And he's like, "Give her flowers now." And I was just like, does it get any more powerful than that, you know? And I was like, "Yes, sir, I will." And so it's just, that moment was something like you're talking about, Tara, where it's not a formal presentation or engagement, but it's so real. And there's this continuity to it, to where now that death happened, something new comes forth. And my ideal with this kind of work is that new life is action, and it can be a deepening to life, and it can be a deepening of love, and just an awakening to things that usually we don't realize until we're at that last step and we look back. And this is just windows into the inevitable. And so it just comes down to what we're doing every day. And this song was just the story of that, and how it's a reminder of me to show her that I love her now, in light of knowing that too could be me sitting at her bed and longing for days to be different in the past. And may that not be. May it be peaceful. Heard it said it's wasted on the young. All the days of dancing in the sun. How could we have known when we were kids that there'd come a day like this? I appreciate you coming out tonight. I know that it's your job, but eat some pie. 'Cause now I'm here, sitting on her bed, and this keeps ringing in my head. Petals turn to ashes, days into the dusk. So it goes for wives and roses and the rest of us. So give her flowers now. They dressed in black and wrapped her in a sheet. I'm glad my daughter helped me wash her feet before you head on home back to your gown. Just remember what I said. Give her flowers now. Give her flowers now.
Thank you, Ian. That's such a beautiful song and
It was an
story.
honor to have that moment with them. That was really one of those times, I'm sure, at the end, when I look back, if I have the luxury to do so, to be like, that night changed me, and it shaped my actions in a different way. And Jennifer, yeah, what breaks our hearts connects us. Yeah, it's that
Mm.
compassion. You know, therein lies the gift of it as well, especially for working with people who've had to say goodbye. There's that intensity of grief that just overwhelms people, and it takes time to learn from that grief how to understand others and to like have that window into that secret world where you can see others that suffer and how many on the outside aren't able to help in that way. And it's that transformation of pain through service and of of giving through of giving through common experience, common pain, common love. It's everything. So thank you guys for letting me share these things.
Oh, thank you for being here, Ian. It's so cool to connect with you here in front of all of these people that came to listen, which is just wonderful. And to be connected by Terra, which is just makes it better, I think. Makes it a little sweeter. Um, does anybody have any questions they want to ask before we end the call, I guess? I know there was a few popped up earlier. So, and if you want to put your microphones on and speak, that's also, you're welcome to do that, or you can just type a question. I did put in everybody's information of where you can find us. Instagram, websites, Facebook, etc. And if you didn't catch it, but you know one of us, you can just send us a message or email the info@musicandcommunities.com, and we'll get you someone's information if you want it. What do you think, Tara?
Yeah, I'm staring everyone down here in the gallery view just in
We did
case
have some great questions earlier, for sure.
We don't want to miss anyone here.
Yeah.
In your thoughts. So, yeah, maybe that's a thought to leave with. I think a big driver for Sarah and I to take on these workshops initially was really just to open up the thought process for people. We can have a pretty fixed view of what it means to make our arrangements, make a will and then plan the funeral. And it's all very pragmatic. We think the things that we have to look after, and even that's easy to put off, as probably most of us can relate to. But I love this spirit. What struck me with Ian, one of the many things that struck me with Ian when I met him during a panel about grief and music, is that at this time in particular, when so many artists and musicians have wrestled with their purpose, in many ways that purpose has changed. If you were used to giving by performing and receiving by performing and having an audience, a lot of people have had to reevaluate that relationship and change it up and reassess what they're doing. And it struck me with both of you that you've found this path that is so purpose driven and so reflective of who you are as people too. I just have so much respect for the way that you have tied it all together. Your caring nature, you're wanting to care for people while they're here, but then also care for the people they leave behind. So I am so thankful to have been the connector between these two people in very different areas. And I know, Ian, a part of what you've been doing is that you've actually wanted to plant the seed of this project, that you've created kind of out of thin air, and reach out to songwriters in other areas to have it grow and blossom there, realizing the need is so widespread. So I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that, about rather this rather than this just being your project and what you do, it being a service that other people can take on the way Sarah has. So do you want to say anything
Right.
about that?
Yeah, a perspective. It's a different way of looking at the artist as a servant, instead of a celebrity necessarily. And how, like we were discussing earlier, it's to those that don't have the access to the arts within their own practice. There's a magic there. There's a transcendence. It's been that way for as long as we've had it in life. Like the arts have elevated and help people transcend the bitterness of human life, and to find the joys and the light within it, and the longevity of what's lasting. They're milestones of time. And so I do sense there's a very specific growth within the duty of the artist in these times, and how technology has both the potential to access and allow for freedom like we're doing right now, and then also to isolate. It's a world of computer screens right now, and I think people crave something warmer and deeper. And I think music and art are the ancient modalities that we still have today in hybrid with technology. And so I think that this this couple of years has led to circumstances that have, like one of you posted, it's a uniting through suffering. Like I think everyone's been affected in some way by the pains of modern times. And what do you do with all that? How can you connect, and how can you feel heard or understood? And the artist is the witness. They're the capturer and the expresser. And I just see so much potential with this, and just the simple ways that I've dedicated to exploring it myself. I've been so encouraged by other artists finding meaning within this, and fulfillment. Like you, Sarah, and Terra too. Just you've tasted the beauties in there, and it's changed my life. And the more that I speak on these types of things, especially with other artists, and kind of welcoming artists to try seeing themselves as a vessel and as an ambassador, and as a healer in this way, not in a formal healing sense, but just taking what is within out in a beautiful way. And a lot of people have a hard time doing that in normal life if they don't have the tools to do so. And so I humbly consider myself a tool and dedicating through the craft and the development of it to become a very effective tool. And so I'm excited to see what the years will bring. And for everybody here, thank you so much for your patience and being a part of listening to this. And I hope it's been inspirational. And if provoking in any way, that tends to be very revealing, as far as our reactions to such topics. I've found that that's very valuable stuff. And so I would encourage you all to listen to Sarah's and Tara's music and what they've created in this regard. And I have my albums as well that have the interviews of the people that I've sat with. And you can look up my name, and the albums that have to do with the legacy work are called Star and Eyes to See the Wind. And then a couple singles like Shadow of the Pine, which I shared earlier.
Beautiful. There was one more question that we just had entered. Is that okay if I read it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So do people, this is from Jerry, again, our friend in Australia. We've gone international again, Jerry, because, well, I guess continental because we're the States and Canada, but international because of you. So thanks for being here again. Do people ever ask for a more offbeat, quirky type of legacy song to remember loved ones in a more lighthearted way, rather than it being a more touching legacy song in order to suit their particular character? Some people just don't want passing on to be a somber thing or afraid of it being that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I'd say the majority of the songs that I've written for people, people want to be uplifting, and they want something that's left behind not to be a weight or a burden, or a negative sadness, I guess you could say, but they want it to be inspiring and helping people transverse the sadness and finding joy and the celebration of life instead of the the sadness of a goodbye necessarily. But I haven't had people request something specifically like, I want this to be ridiculous or crazy. They're just, many times they're like, I want to inspire people, or like, I want to uplift with who I am. And yeah, and so I think that's a beautiful part of it. It's kind of transforming what this environment is in a way through, not irreverently denying sadness or pain with something that's complete opposite side of the spectrum, like, bubblegum pop song about something completely unrelated, but instead, weaving both of those worlds as one, to have acknowledgement of the pain, but also the choice to continue on and to live and to continue to give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Jerry, for that question.
Mhm.
That was a good one. Oh, Tara, I thought you disappeared, but you're still here.
Yes.
Good, you did not leave. All right, well, I think that's all for today, folks. Unless anyone has any more pressing questions, you can ask them. But just want to say a huge thank you to Ian for joining us. It has been wonderful. Who would have thought just a few short months ago we were just meeting, and this is pretty cool that this gets to happen now. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
and
thank
thank
you.
you, Kim, for hosting.
And Sarah, you made a great point in the chat there about people spending so much time looking at screens, and you acknowledged how that can be a distancing thing, but this has felt very warm. This has felt very close, and I am so thankful for everyone who took their evening out to spend this time with us. And I love this comment from Pam in the chat. I want to be a song. That's the
Mm,
spirit to go forward.
that-
Think about the song you would sing to your people that you love, and give them their flowers now. you know yeah, that's the mindfulness that we're hoping for out of these sessions. So thank you to you both, and to Kim. Much appreciated.
Mm-hmm. And thank
thank
you,
you.
Tara. Of course.
Mhm.
Of course.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you guys, and looking forward to many more opportunities in the future to serve alongside you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do look up Blue Cedar Music Therapy. That's where you'll find Sarah's projects that she has been working on. And Ian McCartor, you can find him online, and check out his visual art, which is absolutely stunning as well. If you look at his website or find him on social media, you can see the visual creations that he has made and tributes as well. So great people doing great things. Thank you both.
Thank you all.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Good night, everyone.